Dead weight. Those two words hung in the air of the chilled conference room like toxic smoke, choking the life out of the last 25 years of my existence. My own son, David, stood at the head of the mahogany table, the very table my late husband Robert and I had picked out together at an estate sale when we couldn't even afford the chairs, and pointed a red laser beam right at the center of my name on the projection screen. I looked around at faces I knew better than my own cousins. Janet, who I'd trained from a shy, stuttering intern into a powerhouse manager. Marcus, our attorney, who had eaten Christmas dinner at my house for a decade and bounced David on his knee. They weren't looking at me with pity. They were chuckling. It was a nervous, skittering laughter that felt like a slap across the face, echoing off the glass walls. David didn't stop them. He smiled. That charming dimpled smile he used to give me when he was 6 years old and wanted an extra cookie before dinner. But his eyes were different now. They were cold, calculating, and utterly unfamiliar. "Time to cut the dead weight," he said, his voice smooth as silk, looking right at me with a terrifying lack of emotion. "Starting with Mother." He didn't just fire me, he erased me. In front of 12 board members, my son reduced the thousands of 16-hour days, the missed vacations, the second mortgage we took on the house, and the sacrifices I'd made to build Anderson Tech to nothing more than a burden he needed to shed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a heat rise in my chest that had nothing to do with a hot flash and everything to do with dignity. I stood up, smoothed my navy skirt, the one I'd worn to his college graduation, and picked up my purse. I walked out of that room, past the stunned receptionist who had been knitting a scarf for my birthday, out of the building, and drove straight to the airport. I had a credit card, a passport, and a fury hot enough to power the entire state of Texas. 3 hours later, I was on a plane to Austin with nothing but the clothes on my back and a realization that would change everything. Sometimes the people you love the most are the ones holding the knife. Where are you watching from today, my dears? Drop your location in the comments below. I love seeing how far our family stretches, and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me take you back and tell you how a woman who was called dead weight learned to fly, and how I taught my son the hardest, most expensive lesson of his life. To understand the humiliation of that boardroom, you have to understand the silence of the house I left behind. 3 months earlier, my husband Robert died of a sudden heart attack at 59. We had built Anderson Tech Solutions together, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. When he passed, the silence in our home was deafening. It wasn't just quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. David, our 32-year-old son, had been working his way up through the company. Everyone, myself included, assumed he would eventually step into his father's shoes. But grief is a heavy fog, and while I was trying to find my way through it, David was busy rearranging the furniture. I should have seen the signs. A mother always knows when her child is hiding something, but I didn't want to look. I wanted to believe he was grieving too. I wanted to believe his distance was just his way of coping. But then came the scheduled meetings without me on the invite list. The way he dismissed my suggestions with a patronizing smile and a, "Let me handle the business side, Mom, you just rest." The subtle eye rolls when I'd ask questions about quarterly reports or client relationships I'd helped nurture since before he could spell entrepreneur. But I was drowning in sorrow, barely keeping my head above water. So I let it slide. I thought he was just eager to prove himself, maybe a little overwhelmed by the sudden responsibility. Robert had always planned to transition leadership gradually, but cancer doesn't wait for convenient timing, and neither do heart attacks. The morning of that fateful board meeting, David had asked me to attend what he called a strategic planning session. I arrived 15 minutes early, as was my habit, wearing my navy blue suit and the pearl necklace Robert had given me for our 20th anniversary. I rubbed the pearls between my fingers, a nervous tic I'd developed since the funeral. I thought I was there as a partner, a founding member of the company who still held 30% of the shares. I was wrong. The moment I walked into that conference room, the air felt thin. Our longtime attorney, Marcus Webb, wouldn't make eye contact. He was intensely studying a smudge on the table. Sarah Chun, our head of operations, kept fidgeting with her pen, clicking it in a rapid, annoying staccato. Even Janet Morrison, who'd been with us since the company's second year, seemed unusually interested in her notebook. David stood at the head of the table, all confidence and expensive Italian wool suit, looking every inch the successful executive. "Good morning, everyone," he said, flashing that smile. "I've called this meeting to discuss some necessary changes as we move forward." He clicked on his laptop, and a PowerPoint presentation appeared on the screen. The first slide read, "Streamlining operations for maximum efficiency." I settled into my chair, expecting to hear about departmental restructuring, or maybe new software systems. Instead, David launched into a speech about eliminating redundancies and removing obstacles to progress. He talked about the need for fresh perspectives and modern approaches to leadership. He used words like agility and disruption. For 20 minutes, he danced around his point with corporate buzzwords. Then came the slide that made my blood freeze. Cost analysis. Non-essential personnel. My name was at the top of the list. "As you can see," David continued, his voice taking on that lecturing tone he perfected in business school, "we have several positions that don't contribute directly to our bottom line. People who are here more for sentimental reasons than business necessity." And then he said it. The words that would echo in my mind for months afterward. Time to cut the dead weight. I sat there for a moment, processing what had just happened. My own son had reduced me to a burden in front of people I'd hired, mentored, and considered family. People who'd attended Robert's funeral and hugged me while I cried, telling me they'd always be there for me. The old Margaret would have argued. She would have reminded everyone in that room about the clients she'd brought in, the crises she'd navigated, the 25 years of 16-hour days that built the foundation David was now standing on. She would have fought for her place at the table. But the woman who stood up that morning was someone new entirely. I didn't say a word. I simply gathered my purse, smoothed my skirt, and walked to the door. As I reached for the handle, I turned back one last time. "David," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I hope you remember this moment when you realize what you've just thrown away." And then I left. Not just the meeting, not just the building, but my entire life as I'd known it. That's when I realized I had two choices. Stay in Seattle and fight for scraps of respect from people who clearly didn't value me, or disappear completely and start over somewhere nobody knew me as Robert Anderson's widow or David Anderson's mother. Guess which one I chose? Packing a life into 3 suitcases teaches you what really matters. And apparently what mattered to me fit in a carry-on. Everything else, the china, the linens, the garden tools, was just expensive clutter I'd been dragging around for decades, thinking it made me important. I had exactly 4 hours between leaving that boardroom and my flight to Austin. 4 hours to close one chapter of my life and crack open another. Most people would call that insane. I called it survival. The house felt different when I walked back in, like it belonged to someone else now. Robert's reading chair still had his coffee-stained armrest. The family photos on the mantel showed a woman who smiled too much and asked for too little. I looked at that woman in the silver frame, holding a baby David in her arms, and felt sorry for her. First, I called Janet Morrison. She answered on the first ring, whispering, "Margaret? Are you okay? What just happened in there was?" "Janet," I interrupted, "I need you to do something for me, and I need you to not ask questions." A pause. "Of course. What do you need?" "Access to the client contact database. I want my own copy." Another pause, longer this time. "Margaret, you know I can't. That's proprietary." "Janet." My voice carried a tone I'd never used with her before. "I helped hire you when you were fresh out of college and couldn't get an interview anywhere else because you were pregnant. I trained you myself. I stayed late countless nights to make sure you succeeded. I am not asking you to steal company secrets. I am asking you to email me information that I helped create. Information regarding clients who trust me, not David." Silence stretched between us. I could hear her breathing. "Give me your personal email. You'll have it in 20 minutes. Next, I called my banker. Thomas Richardson had been handling our accounts for 15 years. "Mrs. Anderson, I heard about Robert. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you, Thomas. I need to make some changes to my accounts immediately. I want to transfer my personal funds to a new account at a different bank. I want all statements going to a P.O. box. And I want David removed from any emergency contact lists." The silence on the line told me everything. Word traveled fast in Seattle's business community. "Mrs. Anderson, are you sure this is the right time to make major financial decisions? Grief can sometimes make us impulsive." Thomas, I said, cutting him off the same way I had Janet. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. And Thomas? If David asks, you haven't spoken to me. While I was at the bank, I stopped by Nordstrom and bought what I called my new life wardrobe. Not the conservative suits and sensible shoes I'd been wearing for decades, but clothes that actually reflected who I was underneath all that corporate respectability. Flowing pants, silk blouses in turquoise and coral, colors that made me feel alive, and boots that had attitude. The saleswoman, a stylish lady about my age named Rita, looked at me curiously as I piled colorful fabrics onto the counter. New job? She asked. New everything, I replied, handing her my credit card. By 6 p.m., I was at SeaTac Airport with 3 suitcases, a laptop bag, and a first-class ticket to Austin. I'd chosen Austin for one simple reason. It was as far from Seattle's gray, rainy tech scene as I could get while staying in America. Different culture, different climate, different everything. As I waited at my gate, my phone buzzed with calls from David. The first few went to voicemail. Then came the text. Mom, where are you? We need to talk. This is ridiculous. Come home so we can discuss this like adults. Janet said you had her send you files. That's company property. I turned off my phone without responding. The old Margaret would have felt guilty about the worry I was causing. The new Margaret figured David had made his bed when he called me dead weight in front of our employees. The flight attendant who escorted me to my seat was a cheerful woman named Carmen. First time to Austin? She asked as I settled in, accepting a glass of champagne. First time anywhere without a return ticket, I admitted. Carmen's eyes lit up with understanding. Running away or running towards something? I thought about that as the plane lifted off, watching Seattle shrink beneath the clouds, the Space Needle looking like a child's toy. Both, I finally answered. During the 3-hour flight, I did something I hadn't done in years. I let myself imagine a completely different life. Not as Robert Anderson's widow or David Anderson's mother, but as Margaret Anderson, a woman who was just getting started. I pulled out my laptop and did what any good businesswoman does when she's about to enter unknown territory. Research. Austin's economy was booming. The tech scene was exploding, but still young enough that an experienced consultant could make a real impact. But as I read the reports, a cold spike of fear hit me. I was 60 years old. Was I fooling myself? Could I really compete with these 20-something kids in hoodies who coded in their sleep? I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. I saw the wrinkles, yes. But I also saw the eyes of a woman who had survived the death of her soulmate and the betrayal of her son. If I could survive that, I could survive Texas. When the plane touched down in Austin, the heat hit me first. A warm, humid embrace that felt like the opposite of Seattle's cold shoulder. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Excitement about tomorrow. Finding an apartment in Austin proved easier than finding myself, but both happened faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, I was living in a sleek downtown condo with floor-to-ceiling windows, and the kind of view that made me feel like I was starring in someone else's much more interesting life. The real estate agent, a spirited woman named Linda Rodriguez, had looked at my references with curiosity. Seattle tech executive looking for a complete change, she mused. We get a lot of that here. Austin has a way of calling to people who need to reinvent themselves. Is it that obvious? I asked. Linda laughed. Honey, I've been selling dreams disguised as real estate for 20 years. You've got that look of someone who's just figured out they've been living someone else's life. She wasn't wrong. Everything about Austin felt like permission to be someone new. The music spilling out of every restaurant. The food trucks parked on corners like promises of adventure. The way strangers made eye contact and actually smiled. My condo came furnished, which was perfect since I'd left everything in Seattle. I kept Robert's wedding ring on a chain around my neck, not out of an inability to let go, but as a reminder of the woman who'd been brave enough to love deeply once and could do it again. The first thing I did after signing the lease was buy a proper coffee machine. Not the fancy espresso contraption David had insisted we needed for the office, but a simple drip coffee maker that reminded me of the early days when Robert and I had worked from our kitchen table. While the coffee brewed on my second morning in Austin, I did something that would have horrified the old Margaret. I opened my laptop and started planning revenge. Not the messy, emotional kind, but the strategic, business-like kind. I pulled up the client database Janet had sent me and started analyzing patterns. I also pulled up my employment contract. David had fired me for incompetence and redundancy. My lawyer back in Seattle had confirmed that by firing me without cause and labeling me dead weight, he had effectively voided the non-compete clause that required the company to treat me with good faith. David's arrogance was his first mistake. Anderson Tech Solutions had built its reputation on taking chaotic startups and turning them into functional businesses. As I studied the list, I noticed something interesting. Over the past 5 years, nearly 60% of our most successful projects had been managed directly by me. Not supervised, managed. I had been the one on the phone at midnight with panic CEOs. I had been the one mediating between engineers and business needs. David knew how to present the solutions I had designed, but did he know how to create them? My phone rang, interrupting my analysis. An unknown Texas number. Margaret Anderson, I answered. Ms. Anderson, this is Kevin Murphy from Murphy Ventures. I got your contact information from Linda Rodriguez. She mentioned you might be available for consulting work. I nearly dropped my coffee cup. I hadn't told Linda I was looking for work. What kind of consulting? Management restructuring for a growing tech startup. We've raised $12 million in funding, but we're hemorrhaging money and can't figure out why. 3 days later, I was sitting in Murphy Ventures' conference room. Kevin Murphy was a software genius in his early 30s with manic energy. His team consisted of 6 engineers, 2 marketing specialists, and a bookkeeper who looked like she was having a nervous breakdown. We're spending money faster than we're making it, Kevin explained. We landed 3 major contracts last month, but somehow we're deeper in debt. I spent the next 4 hours doing what I'd done for 2 decades. Asking uncomfortable questions and untangling financial knots. The problem was classic startup syndrome, too much growth too fast without the infrastructure to support it. Here's what's going to happen, I told Kevin, channeling the authority I used to use when David wouldn't clean his room. You're going to implement activity-based costing, restructure your project management workflow, and hire a real CFO. Stop trying to run finances on spreadsheets and hope. Kevin looked at me like I just performed a magic trick. How long would that take? 6 weeks for the framework, 3 months for full integration, I said. My rate is $400 an hour plus a percentage of cost savings achieved in the first year. Kevin didn't even blink. When can you start? Walking out of that meeting, I felt a thrill I hadn't felt in years. Professional excitement. Not the grim satisfaction of fixing other people's mistakes, but the genuine joy of building something better. That evening I called Linda Rodriguez. How did you know I was looking for work? Honey, she laughed. I didn't know for sure. But I've seen enough people starting over to recognize someone who's got skills but needs an opportunity to prove they still matter. As I hung up, I realized something profound. For the first time in years, someone had recommended me for who I was, not who I was married to or related to. The new Margaret was being hired as Margaret Anderson, the problem solver. Success in Austin started small and grew like wildfire. Within 6 months, I'd gone from 1 client to 5. Murphy Ventures became my flagship success story. Kevin's $12 million headache turned into a $20 million profit machine. Word spread through Austin's entrepreneurial community like gossip at a church social. Suddenly, my phone was ringing with calls from venture capitalists and startup founders. I established Anderson Consulting from my condo, but within 3 months I needed real office space. I found a converted warehouse in East Austin with exposed brick walls. My assistant, a sharp 26-year-old named Priya Patel, had business sense that rivaled most MBA graduates. One Thursday morning in October, 8 months after I'd left Seattle, Priya buzzed me. Your 10 o'clock is here. Rebecca Martinez from Cloud Sync Solutions. Rebecca was exactly the type of client I loved helping. Brilliant engineer, chaotic operations. I've heard you're the person to call when everything's on fire, she said. Well, is everything on fire? I asked. Inferno, she admitted. We implemented what I started calling the Anderson method. Systematic analysis, strategic restructuring, and performance metrics that actually mattered. CloudSync's retention jumped to 92%. Rebecca became another evangelist for my firm. By December, I had 11 active clients and a waiting list. I hired 2 additional consultants, Dr. Sarah Kim, an operations genius, and Marcus Thompson, a retired military logistics expert. We were becoming a powerhouse. The financial numbers were staggering. In my first year, Andersen Consulting generated more revenue than my 30% stake in Andersen Tech had ever produced. I celebrated my first anniversary in Texas by taking my team to the best steakhouse in Austin. As we toasted, Priya asked, "Margaret, do you ever miss Seattle?" I thought about David, still running Andersen Tech with the same arrogance. I thought about the house I'd shared with Robert. "I miss who I thought I was going to become there," I said. "But I don't miss who I actually was." As we clinked glasses, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown Seattle number. "Mom, I heard about your firm from Kevin Murphy. We need to talk." David. He'd been tracking me. I showed the message to Priya. "How did he get Kevin's info?" she asked. "Excellent question," I said. "He's probably heard about our success. He's likely panicked." I turned off my phone without responding. If David wanted to talk, he could wait until I was ready to listen. After all, dead weight doesn't come running just because someone calls. David showed up at my office on a Tuesday morning in March. He looked like success had been treating him about as well as a bad case of the flu. The confident executive was gone, replaced by a man with stress lines and desperate energy. "Nice setup, Mom," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk without an invitation. "Quite a step up from that little condo." "Hello, David," I replied calmly. "I'd say this is a pleasant surprise, but we both know I'd be lying." He tried to smile, but it looked painful. "Can't a son visit his mother?" "A son can do whatever he wants. The question is what this particular son wants badly enough to fly to Austin without calling." For a moment the mask slipped. David looked exhausted. "We're having some challenges at Andersen Tech," he admitted. "Nothing major, just growing pains." I waited. Silence is a powerful tool. "The truth is," he continued, "we've lost 3 major contracts. Morrison Industries, TechFlow, and Pacific Dynamics. Those were all clients I had personally managed for years." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, "and I meant it for the employees, not for him. The thing is, these clients are saying they want to work with you. They've been following your work here. They're impressed." There it was. "What are you proposing, David?" He leaned forward. "A partnership. Andersen Tech and Andersen Consulting. We could combine resources, share clients, maybe even merge." I almost laughed. "Let me get this straight. 2 years ago you called me dead weight. Now you want to partner with me because those same employees are losing the clients I cultivated." "I was young and stupid, okay?" David snapped. "I made mistakes. But we're family." "Family," I repeated slowly. "David, when I was grieving your father, did you support me? You pushed me out. You succeeded. So what's changed?" He slumped. "Everything's harder than I thought. Dad made it look easy. You made it look effortless. I didn't realize how much you were handling." "Finally, some honesty," I said gently. "Running a business isn't about looking successful in meetings. It's about solving problems. I know that now. Will you consider the partnership?" I stood up and looked out at the Austin skyline. 2 years ago, I had been living in a shadow. Now, I was the CEO of a company that had never had a dissatisfied client. "David," I said, turning back, "I want you to think very carefully. You want access to my clients, my methods, my reputation. What would I get?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "Because from where I'm sitting, you're asking me to bail out the business you insisted you could run better without me. Why would I give up my independence to fix your mistakes?" David stared at me. "What would it take?" I smiled. The kind of smile that comes from holding all the cards. "David, there's nothing you have that I want. But there might be something I have that you need." I handed him a business card. "When you're ready to hire Andersen Consulting as an outside contractor at our standard rates, give Priya a call." "You're treating me like a client?" he asked, incredulous. "David, you are just another client. The question is whether you're going to be a successful one." He hired us 3 weeks later. Watching him sign the agreement was almost as satisfying as my first $1 million quarter. Almost. I flew to Seattle the next morning. Stepping into the old building felt like visiting a crime scene. The waiting area was scuffed. The receptionist looked harried. Janet Morrison met me at the elevator, relief washing over her face. Margaret, thank God. She filled me in on the drive up. Revenue is down 60%. We've laid off 12 people. The names hit me hard. Tom from accounting. Maria from project management. People with families. We walked into the conference room where the remaining consultants were waiting. For 4 hours they presented their failing projects. It was like watching someone try to perform surgery with a spoon. The Hartwell project, I interrupted Mark Stevens. You're solving the wrong problem. Their warehouse layout is fine. The issue is data integration. The room went quiet. How could you know that? Patricia Wells asked. Because I helped them implement their system 4 years ago. I've seen this exact issue before. By the end of the day, I had identified the fundamental flaw in every single project. David asked to speak with me privately. How did it get this bad? He asked in Robert's old office. Consulting is about pattern recognition, David. Your father spent 20 years learning it. And he relied on me because he knew his strengths were in sales, not solving problems. He looked like a lost little boy. What do I do now? Option 1. Hire me for 6 months to retrain your team. Cost, $200,000. Option 2. Sell the company while it still has assets. Option 3. Keep doing this and be bankrupt in 18 months. He paled. If I choose option 1, would you stay? Take over as CEO. I paused. 2 years ago, I would have given anything for that offer. David, I already am a CEO. The question is whether you're ready to become a student. That evening at dinner, Janet dropped the bombshell that would shatter whatever trust one had left in my son. We were at our old favorite seafood place, the one with the crab cakes Robert loved. Margaret, Janet said, putting down her fork. There's something else. David took out a significant loan last year. $800,000. He personally guaranteed it. My stomach dropped. If the company failed, David would lose everything. His house, his kids' college funds. And, Janet continued, her eyes filling with tears, he told clients. He told them why you left. I know, I said. He said I was dead weight. No, Margaret. He told them you had a breakdown. I froze. What? Janet reached across the table and took my hand. He told Morrison Industries and the others that you were suffering from early onset dementia. He said you were becoming forgetful, unreliable. He said the family had to remove you for your own safety to protect the clients. The restaurant sounds faded away. The clatter of silverware, the laughter of other patrons, it all went silent. My son hadn't just fired me. He hadn't just insulted me. He had systematically dismantled my reputation and my dignity to cover his own incompetence. He told people I was losing my mind so they wouldn't question why the company was failing without me. I felt something crack inside my chest. It wasn't my heart, that had already broken. It was the last shackle of maternal guilt. Janet, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. Document everything. Names, dates, quotes. I want it all in writing. The next morning I called an all-hands meeting. I stood up and told the truth. I didn't leave because I was sick. I didn't leave because I was confused. I left because my son called me dead weight. I'm here to clean up a mess, and then I'm going back to my successful company in Austin. You could have heard a pin drop. David looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. For the next month, I commuted between Austin and Seattle. We retrained staff, fixed systems, and stabilized clients. David shadowed me, eating humble pie every single day. I was professional, distant, and effective. But the final blow was yet to come. One afternoon my attorney Patricia called. Margaret, I found something in David's loan documents. A successor liability clause. It's very rare, but it's there. If David defaults, and if the company transfers to another family member, that person becomes responsible for the debt. But I don't own the company, I said. I left. David never filed the transfer papers, Patricia revealed. You still own 30%. And because of this clause, if the company fails, they can come after your Austin assets. Your condo, your savings, your business. The trap snapped shut. David hadn't just been incompetent. He'd set me up as his failsafe. If he went down, he was taking me with him. He had kept me on the books legally, just in case he needed a scapegoat or a wallet. How long have you known? I asked David later, throwing the documents on his desk. He looked white as a sheet. I didn't think it would matter. I thought you'd come back and fix it. You thought you could manipulate me into saving you? I was scared, Mom. I was scared I'd fail. Fear makes people do terrible things, I said, my voice ice cold. But this ends today. What are you going to do? I'm taking over. For real. I'm filing for majority control, restructuring the debt, and merging the companies. You can stay as an employee or you can leave. But you will never ever gamble with my life again. You can't just take my company. David, I said. Deadweight doesn't get to choose whether it sinks or swims, but it can choose whether to go down quietly or make a scene. And darling, I am done being quiet. He folded. He had no choice. 6 months later, I stood on a stage in Seattle, accepting an award for Business Turnaround of the Year. Anderson Technologies, the newly merged powerhouse, was thriving. Revenue was up 300%. David was in the back of the room clapping. He was a junior consultant now, learning the business from the ground up the way he should have years ago. He looked healthier, less stressed, but humbled. After the ceremony, he approached me. Mom, he said quietly, handing me a cup of coffee. I've been trying to figure out how to say this. Take your time. I was wrong. About everything. I'm sorry. I know, I said. Do you think you can ever really forgive me? I looked at him. My son. The boy who broke my heart and inadvertently gave me the push I needed to find my own strength. David, I said. I forgave you the moment I realized your worst decision led to my best life. If you hadn't pushed me out, I never would have known I could fly on my own. I'm grateful you forced me to stop making myself smaller. He teared up. So you're grateful I sabotaged you? I'm grateful you taught me that dead weight can be the anchor that holds everything together. I smiled, taking the coffee. Now drink up. We have a client meeting at 8, and you're driving. I looked out the window at the city lights reflecting off the rain-slicked streets. I was Margaret Anderson. Not just a widow, not just a mother, but a woman who had built an empire from the ashes of betrayal. And let me tell you, my dears, the view from the top is spectacular. If you've ever had to reinvent yourself when life tried to push you down, let me know in the comments. And remember, darlings, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just succeeding so beautifully that the past can't help but applaud. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. I'll see you next time.